Good afternoon, everybody. For those people that weren't here for the last presentation, my name is Chris Boys. I had a great pleasure of working for British Aerospace between 74 and 78. What I'd like to do now is give you a brief insight to some of the flight and ground tests. And the first one I'd like to describe is engine airframe on object damage. Look at the fine-tuning of the Olympus engine and the combined intake and ejector system, short field landing tests, transonic acceleration tests, and the clear vision after takeoff tests. So starting with the undercarriage foreign object deflectors, you can see there that this is a very early design. This was designed to prevent any foreign objects from contacting the airframe or entering the engine intakes. The design was enhanced somewhat. That's the only picture I could actually acquire. But in terms of testing the foreign object damage, French school children were involved in this test, which sounds a little bit unusual. I'd like to explain why. Could anybody tell me what the best colour of a foreign object would be to identify on a Concorde where strikes were taken? Well, you wouldn't be using white, so what do you think?
Yellow.
Orange?
Was that you, Brian, that said black? The best colour would have been black. However, does anyone guess why they didn't use black?
Because you might not find it on a black runway when you went to clean up afterwards.
Not quite. The reason why they didn't use black was because of the actual material used to simulate the foreign objects. And they're actually chalk, as used in a school. So we're all familiar with blackboards, so that's why there's no black chalk. So how are the French children involved? Well, you can see on the picture there that you've got yellow, red, there's some green, blue and white. That picture's not accurate, but because of the distribution of the foreign object, I only put it in like that because it would have been near impossible to see the separate items. The 7,500 pieces of foreign object test material consisted of pieces of chalk, and the French children were given about 400 kilos of chalk. And remember, you get them in the box, and the chalk's about so long. Okay, what the French children were tasked to do was break each piece of chalk so long into four. They contributed significantly to the test, and they could only find the children that were prepared to actually sit down and break all these pieces of chalk. So the different coloured pieces of chalk would distribute on the runway, the aircraft would land, and then they'd photograph the airframe and intakes. Okay, I'd like to talk about fine-tuning the engines and durability tests. I'll show you the location of the engine test facility, that red area, and it wasn't really optimum because straight ahead of it you had just a grass area, and it rains a lot in the UK, so didn't have very good ability to take the weight of Concorde should it actually end up on the grass. So in terms of the test, it consisted of running the engines for 20 minutes, full thrust including afterburner, and the early Concordes had a braking system which would actually hold the aircraft against that thrust. Later versions in the production could not actually hold the aircraft static on full thrust. So the aircraft was chopped and the brakes were put on, and the 20-minute test was undertaken. Now there's a nickname for this test. I was actually on one of the tests, and the aircraft really wanted to jump the chocks. So it was jumping up and down, and therefore it got the nickname of the brown trouser test. I'll move on to the short field landing test. The reason why they were undertaken was that they had a Concorde which they wanted to relocate to Duxford, and that's where the Aviation Museum is in the UK. Now the problem was that there was a motorway being constructed, our freeway, north of London, where Duxford is. And this motorway was going to take off approximately 500 metres of the runway. And on a Friday afternoon, I was asked to follow the flight test engineers and assist in this precise measurement of the minimum landing distance. So I'll just give you a few facts. At runway 27 at Filton, you see that the overall runway is approximately about 2,200 meters. Now the minimum landing distance for a production Concorde is 2,200 meters. However, when Concorde flew in and out of Filton, it wasn't at gross weight or it wasn't at maximum landing weight, and so it's safe to take off and land there. The Fairford runway was 2,900 meters long, and that's where all the gross weight takeoff and landing tests were done. So at Duxford, the length of the runway before it was shortened was 1,800 meters, and after it was shortened, it was 1,300 meters. So Brian Trubshaw, the chief test pilot, wanted to make sure that he could actually get in, and if they couldn't land on a Saturday due to weather, then they wouldn't be able to get it in, because 1,200 meters, slightest error, and you wouldn't be able to stop. So what happened was, like I say, I was asked to come along with some of my colleagues, and we stood at the edge of the runway here, 30 meters apart. And Brian Trubshaw flew 4 circuits, and I think I was number 2 here. So you're actually only 32 meters from the wingtip. And I tell you what, Concorde looks pretty big when it lands in front of you, and you're only 32 meters away from it. So what the technique was, whoever was adjacent to where the main wheels hit the runway, they'd put their hand up. Really high technology this was. And someone else would come along and put a mark on the runway. If Concorde landed, main wheels landed between 2 people, then they both put their hands up. And at the end, where the aircraft came to a full stop, then again the runway was marked. So Brian did these circuits with the objective of proving a consistent minimum landing distance. The other thing I'd like to note is that not only was Concorde pretty big when you're that close to it, yet the landings weren't what you'd call smooth. I think Brian was aiming to land about a meter under the runway. So yeah, the Oleos did squat quite a lot. Well, Brian finished the tests on a Friday, and on a Saturday the weather was marginal, but he had to get it in, because if he delayed, then the runway would be cut short, and then we'd never get a Concorde in there at Duxford. And you can see there the normal landing distance of 2,200 meters. Brian managed to stop it in 1,200 meters, and a couple of reasons why. The aircraft was very light, and it had the ability to, they were using higher rated brakes compared to the production one. Okay, let's move on to transonic acceleration optimization test. So another test that I was involved with, and the maximum drag, as you can see, is Mach 1, and when you get to Mach 0.8, the aircraft doesn't have enough thrust to accelerate anymore. So you light up the afterburners, and the aircraft pushes through that high drag phase, and when you get to Mach 1.2, you turn off the afterburners. And what's surprising is that approximately the fuel flow at Mach 2 was 25% of the fuel flow at Mach 1.2. I just showed you how the whole airframe, engines, intakes were optimized for Mach 2.01. The last test I'd like to discuss is the clear vision after bird strike test. Now, I haven't put up any photographs because we just had lunch, and they were a bit graphic. And what happened was they positioned Concorde on the runway, all engines running, and they push a boarding staircase up against the cockpit area, so whoever's standing on top of it could reach to the windshield. And British Aerospace only had one person that was prepared to do this test, because he had to be a bit of a sadistic type. And what happened was he climbed up the staircase with a freshly killed goose, having its neck just wrung, and he would hit the windshield repeatedly until there was very, very little left of the geese. Hence no pictures after lunch. So the boarding staircase was then rapidly removed from the scene, and Concorde took off. Shortly after takeoff, at about 1,000 feet, the windscreen wiper system was switched on, and the whole issue about this test was to see if the wiper system would clear what was left of the goose off the windshield. In other words, blood and guts. And it actually did the job okay. And on one particular test, Brian Trubshaw was flying, and he had a very sharp sense of humour. As on his test, at the point of rotation on takeoff, the airflow changed around the drooped nose, and this goose's head shot past the windshield, to which Brian remarked, "I didn't know a head-up display had been fitted since I last flew her." So I had some fun times flying with Brian. He had a really good sense of humour. So that concludes my presentation. Any questions, I'll very happily take.
Chris, what was the plan B if the goose guts all stayed in place and they couldn't see anymore?
Okay, they only did it on the captain's side, so
Okay.
at least they could see out to land from the P1 position.
Did you actually get to fly the aircraft yourself?
No, I was part of the flight test engineering section, so no, I didn't fly it, but I was involved with collecting test data and processing it, and witnessing some of the test flights. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I hope you enjoyed it.